Hi, everyone. Very excited for Evolving Enterprise this year. I'm Tiffany Luck, an investor at GGB Capital, where I focus on enterprise software, and excited to be joined today by Jeanne Grosser, the head of America's Revenue and Growth at Stripe, and Sara Varni, the Chief Marketing Officer at Twilio, for a great discussion on the API economy. So Jeanne and Sara, thank you both very much for joining us. I thought to get started, we could do just quick intros from each of you. And maybe also in your intro, if you could just give us a little taste of what got you excited about Stripe and Twilio.
Great. I'll go first. I'm Sara Varni. I'm the CMO at Twilio. I've been with the company for about 3 years. And what really excited me about Twilio was what they're doing for B2C customers to help expand the way they think about customer engagement. I had come from Salesforce, where I'd spent 10 years there working on their flagship product, the Sales Cloud, and the idea to be equally innovative in the B2C space when it comes to customer engagement was something that I just couldn't pass up.
And hi, everyone. I'm Jeanne. So I lead America's Revenue and Growth for Stripe, which is sort of Stripe for sales. Been with Stripe for 5 years, joined when we were about 6 months into doing anything official from a sales perspective. So helped build out a bunch of what we're doing from the ground up. Was super excited to join Stripe because I saw the potential as the economy continued to shift online to really be able to do transformative things with companies. And then also, in line with the API economy, really is an opportunity to work on products where you're building right alongside your customer, which to me felt like a really engaging sale relative to some of the other things I'd done. And so I was excited to give that a try.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys both. Super excited. I think one thing that would be great to touch on that I know I have a lot of conversations about and is a hot topic, and you guys have both very good experience with is, the move from a kind of a pure developer self-serve or primarily inbound driven business to enterprise sales. And actually what that journey is like and what that's meant for both of you, how you've successfully navigated it, and truly kind of any advice for companies going through this. I know it's to crack that outbound success would be, everyone's looking for it. So any advice would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to kick us off. So when I started at Stripe, we were predominantly selling to Series A, Series B tech companies. And it was exactly like what you mentioned, very developer-driven, founder-driven sale. Really strong organic growth from that. But if you aspire to be a really big company, you often need to increasingly work with some big companies as well. And so as we started to move up market, one of the things that we figured out was as much as we absolutely adore developers, they're not going to be the decision maker once you get into a larger company. So for us, that decision maker shifted from being the developer or on the technical side of the house to actually being the CFO in sort of a Series C, Series D. So the first thing we had to do was get good at selling to a financial buyer. And then it was interesting, actually, when we moved up even further into real enterprise companies, you got a new persona in the account, which for us was head of payments. And they had an entirely different language and set of things that they cared about as well. So I think that's one of the things you learn is like you're going to have to, start talking to different personas, and they care about a bunch of different things. And so actually one of the interesting things that came out of that for us was, Stripe is known for being loved by developers. And we actually now have a product team at Stripe where their mission is to get the head of finance to love Stripe as much as the developer does. That's literally like the documented goal of this product team. So that would be one of the core things I think folks have to learn is there are a couple other people who are going to make the decisions when you get into big companies.
We've had a super similar experience at Twilio. Our heritage too is in developers, and our joke at Twilio is that we're a 13-year-old sales team, a 13-year-old company with a 3-year-old sales team. So it was not until recent times that we started to add a true go-to-market function. And, very similar to what Jeanne was talking about, we have both that bottoms-up approach, and we definitely don't want to alienate our developer community who has made us what we are today. But as we started to increasingly sell to the enterprise, we also need to have a tops-down approach with the right decision makers in organizations across customer support and marketing and product management. And for us, I think one big thing, coming at it from a marketing angle, at Twilio, developers don't like to be told what to do. They don't want to be told what to build. They're fine if you say, hey, here's this problem, go solve it. And when you start selling to enterprise decision makers, that's actually not the case. So we went from a mantra at Twilio of, we can't wait to see what you build. And we absolutely still say that with our developer community. We encourage them to dream up whatever they can dream up. But when it comes to selling to a business audience, you need to be a little bit more prescriptive and say, hey, you want to send delivery notifications. Here's how you can do that with Twilio. And by the way, it's going to increase your conversion to payment by X%. So that took some work as a marketing organization to evolve to accommodate not just our bottoms up motion, but also our tops down approach.
Got it. And then how do you think about that? Just from are they still two separate motions from you in terms of getting the buyers on board, but then also really making sure that you have champions and turning those developers into your champions still, or how are they working together? And I guess how has that evolved since the early days? When you first started out moving toward outbound.
Yeah, I mean, for us, they're two sides of the same coin. Actually, that was another thing that I think we've had to learn and relearn was, we figured out, wait a minute, there's a financial buyer here, got really excited about that. But then what would happen would be you'd win over the financial buyer, not having won over the technical buyer, and you'd never deploy, right? Mm-hmm. Or you'd win over the technical buyer, but not the financial buyer, and you'd never sign. And so we really learned those things have to be dual tracked. And actually what I think we're now learning even further is that when you dual track those, now you need to quantify the value of what you're doing on the technical side of the house, because it's part of the broader TCO conversation when you get into these mega traditional enterprises. So we continue to really figure out how to bring the two together into the same, broader conversation. And I feel like we've also learned how to do interesting things to continue to incept the developer, because that works so well, with the tech community. So examples would be when you get into traditional enterprise, you're always going to get stuck behind RFPs. One of the things we started doing, actually, I think I've heard Twilio does some really amazing stuff here as well, but introduce the concept of a hackathon to an RFP, because that really brings your product to life and shows how we're differentiated relative to maybe more legacy solutions. So we still try to lead with technology, even when you're, in a less technical buyer arena.
Yeah, it's very similar for us at Twilio. I think we're always, in my world, I'm always trying to think about how can I shorten the fuse between developer interest and a real project that's got budget behind it. Anytime we walk into an enterprise account where developers already know us, the better off we are and the faster that deal is going to happen. To Jeanne's point, we do run a program called Enterprise Hackathons, and it's kind of an American Idol style competition. We bring some of our developer evangelists on site. The customer comes with some use cases that they want to explore. And, over the course of the day, the developers get skilled up on Twilio, and then they demo to their business leaders. And it's a win-win for our customers and a win-win for us. Our customers have the ability to train their developers up on a skill, free of charge. And for us, we're accelerating proofs of concept that could have taken a year or 18 months to get off the ground. And so we found that a very productive way to, again, shorten that fuse between developer interest and what an enterprise is looking to do.
That's awesome. That's also a very good visual. Brings back a lot of good memories of American Idol. I guess one last question on outbound. For companies who are still making this transition, any pitfalls to avoid, or any kind of challenges that you guys ran up against where you were like, this is so hard, this is taking a long time, kind of advice for just sticking through, or, just I feel like it can take quite a while to go from inbound to outbound, and it's it's not necessarily something that happens overnight. So just like anything for those in the thick of it that you would say as encouragement.
I'll say for me personally, like coming from an enterprise SaaS background, I had to make sure that I didn't just apply the enterprise like Salesforce playbook at every step of the journey. I think especially with developers, you have to be very careful to not over market. You know, one of my favorite bosses has always said to me, "Hey, Sara, rule number one of marketing to developers is don't market to developers." And so I think there's real truth in that, and I think you have to get really good with your data when it comes to outbound and be able to recognize the signals when a technical resource is legitimately raising their hand for help. And then you've got to come in and not oversell. You've got to come in and be helpful. I think that is the best path forward. But for a lot of your sales organization, that's not their natural instinct. And so it takes some coaching and enablement to really make sure that you're converting as much of that developer interest as you can without eroding that developer trust over time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Maybe a couple of things I'd add would be one, it's never too early to start outbound. I think that is like the classic mistake is like drowning in inbound, basically like staff to cover your inbound instead of being like, I should already be staffing well ahead of this so that my sales force, is hungry enough to start outbound now, because it's not going to get a payback period in 90 days or 6 months.
No.
So that'd be one, start now. Two is that exact point, which is like, I can't tell you the number of accounts that now that I'm 5 years into Stripe that we took runs at 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and are winning today. And so it really, almost the first time you start outbound, one of the things I always tell folks on our outbound team is like, you guys are half outbound sales and you're half awareness marketing. Because particularly as you go into these enterprises, like our brands are probably super strong with the developer community, but they aren't yet really well-known household names with the enterprise community. So some of it is just making sure people know we exist. And then piggybacking on what Sara said, we're also super careful around when we outbound, we tend to outbound to business decision makers, not to developers. And so that way you're not doing anything to tarnish your developer brand.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so on the topic of developer trust, love that. And wanted to talk a little bit about community actually, and how you guys think about developer community or just community building in general, and how that's a part of your strategy or your strategies, and how maybe if that's evolved over time as well.
Do you want to start on that one, Sara?
Oh, sure. Either way. Community is part of everything that we do at Twilio. If you go to any of our events, well, when we used to be face-to-face, you'd see everyone kind of in their red Twilio track jackets. And that's kind of our badge of honor if you've built an app on the Twilio platform. And we've started to extend that to some of the kind of power users in our community. I think of our community as an amplification arm of everything that we're doing, and a way for us, honestly, to scale. We need to be a global marketing organization that's driving global awareness, and we can't be, given the current state of where we are from a resource perspective, we can't do that fast enough with our own internal resources. And so we need to think about what are the programs that we can package up and give to our community to go out and talk to a broader audience than we service today. So it's absolutely part of our motion. And with every launch and with every product announcement we're doing, we definitely think about, there's definitely always a work stream around how we're igniting our community to go communicate the launch on our behalf.
Yeah. When Sara and I were chatting previously about this, I thought a really good point you made then too was around how it's really important that you meet your community where it is. And so I think a lot of what we do too is just how do you lean into where developers already are and support them there. I think the other thing, for us at Stripe is obviously, John and Patrick, our co-founders, are still really deeply engaged in the community themselves. So we do a lot to continue to utilize them there, which frankly, I think they would do regardless. But, one of my favorite things, people may have seen this, is I think he did it maybe a month ago, Patrick will just tweet and be like, tell me everything you don't like about Stripe. What are the things we should be doing? And, goes and gets 10,000 responses. And then, we actually internally read them all, tagged them, sorted them, and they're really, really informing our roadmap for this year.
Yeah, and you remember that. I think, when you're thinking about this evolution of developer to enterprise, there is that inflection point, like you said, where you have to decide, should we be going where the developers are already gathering? And that might be something that you want to do forever. But I think at some point in time, when you start to sell to different buyers, there's an expectation to come to your website and also get immediate access to a Twilio community. And I think you've got to decide at what point in time you need to also create your own, company branded community as well.
And speaking of expansion to other buyers, obviously you guys both have very kind of developer-centric communities. Have you thought about expansion to other communities, or are you doing community building, for other leaders as well?
Well, yeah, actually we have. So this was actually one of the more interesting things that I experienced. So like I said, when we get into these larger enterprises, you encounter this head of payments persona. And it's a pretty specific role. A lot of folks who are in that role, have come from industry. They might have worked at Visa for, a decade. And we did a head of payments roundtable because payments is evolving so rapidly. This was, again, when we could all get together in person, but, got 10 heads of payments, from Uber, from Expedia, et cetera, together for dinner. And it was the first time they had ever spoken to each other because there was no actual head of payments community in the market. And it was one of the more interesting things. It was a very dynamic conversation because I think people are so excited to be like, I have a peer in the market. Yeah. So, I think it's fairly typical to do CXO roundtables, et cetera. But often there's, a key influencer or even decision maker a layer below your CXOs that doesn't get that same level of love. And so we've found that they're really deeply engaged when you actually give them a forum to connect with you and connect with one another.
Yeah, 100%. Sarah, no, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, at Twilio, we have a wide range of buyers, from like a head of contact center to a CMO to a product manager. And so we don't have necessarily concentration around one buying center when it comes to content and campaigns quite yet, although contact center is emerging for us to a certain extent. But what I will say is I think we've evolved. We used to try to make content just kind of work for all personas. And what we found is that we were not technical for half of our audience, and we were too technical for the other half. And so what we've tried to do now is make sure for all of our major use cases, we have the why you should care and why this is important for your business for our line of business buyers, and then actually how you can do it, and back that with the documentation and the tutorials, so that the technical influencer can get on their way and know what they have to do and not have to read a 10-page white paper to figure it out.
That's awesome. Jeanne, now that you've mentioned roundtables and dinners, I'm just thinking about pre-COVID days and all of the small group dinners and how wonderful they are to host. But I'm curious, how you shifted, or how has community building looked different, if at all, post-COVID or in an all virtual world, and what you guys think that might look like, later or in the future, if it's going to be hybrid, or how you're thinking about that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that for better or for worse with COVID, since everybody's forced to live their day in Zoom, people have been amenable to, taking what used to be an in-person thing and moving it into a Zoom format. So we've had actually pretty good success with taking maybe not quite those intimate dinner type things, but a lot of our formats that were in person and actually just shifting them online. I think what we've learned from that, though, is they need to be a bit more snackable. So it's not going to be an hour. It's going to be 30 minutes or 20 minutes. And then you have to be a lot more thoughtful about how do you build engagement into that format versus just sort of talking at people for 30 minutes. But we've actually been able to replicate a fair amount of it. And then Stripe will have our big conference of the year is Sessions. And so that'll happen later this year. And I think we're trying to look at how do you use platforms differently so that people sort of get a multimedia experience that maybe is a little bit more similar to what you might have had if you were walking around in an event center.
Yeah, it's super similar for us. I think like Jeanne and I are living parallel lives. These companies are very similar, but yeah, from a events perspective, we have had that mentality. But you can't always just lift and shift what was working in person to virtual, and you have to think about what the audience attention span is. And I've tried to inspire the team by saying like, hey, you watch Netflix every weekend. What inspires you to watch like episode 6 of whatever, Emily in Paris or whatever the show happens to be? And like, let's use some of that from our consumer life and apply it to, our virtual programs. And there's a lot of things you can actually do virtually that you can't do face to face. We were able to take our demos to another level. We were able to, film stuff on an XR stage and really place Twilio technology in real context of, hospital waiting room, for example. And my joke lately has been like, we've kind of dug our own grave. I think for a lot of event program leaders, we're basically doubling our work because there's a lot that people love from the virtual world, but people are still obviously craving that face-to-face and in-person engagement. And so I think we're going to see a lot of what we learned through COVID. People are going to still want that, but also the, in-person, real events. And so in some ways we're doubling our work overnight post-COVID. But I am really excited I'm optimistic about the rest of the year. I'm excited to open things back up and just get out and get in front of customers again. I personally really miss that. And I think there's no substitute for in-person interaction.
Yeah, Sarah, you're going to have to get an extra large order of the Twilio track jackets.
Exactly.
Okay, one more hot topic, and I think one, where Twilio and Stripe are both, have both been very successful, and a lot of, also get a lot of questions around this. How should companies think about really a product to platform transition, right? Where they've got kind of a single product in the early days, and are thinking about how they can transition to, really become like this large, powerful platform with a suite of products that help their customers. And you guys have obviously been very successful at that. So any advice around how a product company can grow up to be a platform company?
Yeah, I think we have moved into quite a few natural adjacencies. So Stripe started, with payments, and then you've got all sorts of things like fraud or adaptive acceptance that are going to optimize that payments layer. And then sitting above that, you've got all sorts of logic to run your business. And, at some point, we're sort of running the whole revenue stack. And so, people will hate this because it sounds trite, but like really it's you go from products to solutions.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're going to be a platform company, it's not just, hey, we've got 5 products, so let me talk to you about 5 products on a call. It's, hey, let me talk to you about this problem that we're going to solve by putting these 5 products together in a coherent fashion. That's something, frankly, we're still really building the muscle around at Stripe, is like, how do I not talk to you about radar, right? But how do I talk to you about how you're going to optimize conversion, and fraud is a piece of that. So I think it's really, a lot of it is actually being, which I think would resonate with folks, right, is being customer centric.
Yeah.
Because talking about products is very you centric, but talking about problems and solutions is actually helping them get what they need done.
Yeah, I would agree. I think at Twilio, it's been a mix of listening to our customers and watching what they're doing with the primitives of our platform, but then also being the eyes and ears out in the market to show them the way to, new technology and new innovation that we think is going to be really impactful for them moving forward. And, a perfect example for that in Twilio's world is what we've been doing in the contact center space. We started to see customers like ING, big European old school bank, start to use some of our primitives one by one to run parts of their contact center. They started with messaging, then added voice, and then added video. And then they took a step back and said, hey, we're actually running all of our contact center now on Twilio. And that was, pairing that with what we're hearing in the larger market around contact center and people wanting to have things that are more customizable, easier to really bend to your own customer experience, was all we needed to motivate our teams to build more of a full-fledged contact center solution, based on the primitives that we saw people using together over and over. But I think it's key to not take one customer pilot or one customer example and assume that that's how the market views everything. I think you have to be careful to make sure that there is real market opportunity for you as a company, and that also, you are, pushing your customer base forward and continuing to innovate at the same time.
Yeah,
Yeah, that makes sense. Go ahead, Jeanne.
I was going to say that the other thing that made me think of just to add is like going from sort of product to platform also is like how you commercialize the platform.
Mm-hmm.
So the other thing that I think we're still working through at Stripe is like, okay, we've got a bunch of products. We've now figured out how to talk about them as a solution. But when you go to contract with us, you still have 5 products, right? Versus us being smart about pricing, packaging, bundling, right? And so that feels like another part of the journey that I think we're continuing to work on getting right. And then going back to some of Sarah's earlier points, then really putting together these reference architectures around this. Because again, it's actually quite complicated to get 5 different things working together in a much, much more sophisticated solution. And so that's also where these enterprises are like, Jeanne, you work with 1,000 marketplaces. We're building a marketplace for the first time. Just tell me how to build a marketplace.
Right.
And you don't get that from like a Series A startup, but you really get that from a Fortune 1000 that's trying to pivot their business model.
Right. And where like documentation for like one specific use case might have worked and one, or one specific API might have worked, when you get into these more, in our world, multi-channel use cases and more complicated architectures, there is a different need, all the way from packaging and pricing to, documentation and actually how people can get up and running. For sure.
Awesome. Well, I know we started out and you guys just gave a quick few minutes on why you were excited about Stripe and Twilio. And I thought maybe we could also end with excitement, and just maybe a little bit more generally around, the opportunity ahead. Like, how would you characterize the opportunity ahead? Not just maybe specifically for Stripe and Twilio, but just kind of for the API model in general, or where are we on the adoption curve for APIs, or why is this model so powerful, and just how do you see the world and the opportunity moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think one silver lining of COVID is it's been a huge accelerant, I think, for both Jeanne and my business at Twilio. And I think it's opened up people's eyes to different use cases that they were thinking of as, maybe nice to have and something they get to in a year or two, but now they're absolutely, mission critical. We did a survey at Twilio of 2,500 business decision makers, and they said on average their technical roadmap was accelerated by 6 years because of COVID, which is insane. And so I love being at an API company where you can deconstruct the applications that you want to build to really meld to whatever your customer experience is that you're dreaming up. And I just think that that's the power of APIs. You're not locked into a solution that's way up the stack that might have an opinion and have everything laid out. You can build whatever you want to map to that really unique customer experience that is becoming a differentiator for a lot of the brands we work with today. The Ubers and the Airbnbs, they didn't invent hotels, they didn't invent taxis, they invented a new way to engage with your customers. And I think that that's all through the power of API driven software.
Yeah, I really couldn't agree more. With Stripe, our focus on increasing the GDP of the internet, COVID, we similarly think shifted, that trek by at least a year, if not more, into the future. So it's been great to see some of the types of companies that probably would have never thought they might, work with Stripe be not only working with us, but getting things into market within 30 days. And similar to Sarah's point, I think the thing about the API and platforms as a service is the flexibility. And I think a lot of what we're seeing in the market right now and will continue to see is business model reinvention. And so when you have these APIs that give you the primitives, give you the components, that enables people to be more inventive with what they ultimately want to bring to market from a product and a customer experience perspective. And I think that's also what makes go-to-market fun for it, is it's like naturally more flexible and consultative than I've got this sort of piece of packaged software and like, sure, I'll pitch it to you with your use case in mind. But at the end of the day, it's the same piece of software no matter who buys it. So that certainly is what gets me excited to get out of bed every morning for it.
Sure.
Awesome. Love it. Super excited. And totally agree. I feel like, it's one silver lining has been that COVID has really, really pulled forward like years into months or, a shorter time frame. And I feel like the pace will just continue, like the accelerated pace will continue. No one's really slowing down from here. So very bright future. And I really appreciate you guys both being here. Thank you so much. This was a great, great conversation. And thank you for being at Evolving Enterprise.
Awesome. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Yeah.